What's up, guys? You're listening to a April 13th edition of the Splash Ag podcast. Today I'm going to do a little new segment, kind of. Let's call this the Matt Monday Monologues. Just get some nice alliteration in there. And to add even more to that, today, April 13th, is Mamba Day. I say that because April 13th, 2016 was Kobe's last game. And that is probably one of the most unreal experiences that I've been fortunate enough to have as a sports fan. Watching that game, I remember wearing my Kobe jersey while watching it. I didn't miss a second of it. And I'll talk about it this more in a second, but I was so hyped that I couldn't sleep, considered making a late night IHOP run. And on top of that, I slept in the jersey and this undershirt, and then I went to school wearing the same thing the next day just because I was still so amped up from that game. So I could have a lot of alliterative twists. I could call it, Matt's Mamba Day Monday monologue or Matt's Monday monologue on Mamba Day, whatever you want to call it. But anyhow, I'm just like a lot of these monologues, I just kind of want to shoot the shit, talk a little bit about what's been going on. Obviously, right now we're dealing with a global pandemic, so hopefully you're staying safe. And obviously, sports are not at the forefront of what's important, but me just getting the chance to talk about it and digest some news and talk and discuss it's a good way to get my mind off a lot. Plus, obviously, with being in self quarantine, you you got more time to kill than usual. So now's not a bad time to be cranking out some podcasts. So, anyways, I'm just gonna get right to it. So let's start with April 13th and what decreed as Mamba Day. Now, I was just actually speaking with my two brothers, and I told them talked about, hey, it's Mamba Day, and one of them brought up a point saying, "Isn't 8 August 24th, 8-24 Mamba Day?" And I said, "Yeah, that's true. August 23rd actually is Kobe's birthday." And so you have August 23rd and then August 24th. That in a lot of ways could be like this little 2-day period to really honor and celebrate Kobe. And then another one of my other brother said, "Dude, every day is Mamba Day," and he's got a point. We Obviously there are certain days that are special, whether it's the 81 point game anniversary, today being the anniversary of his last game, and so forth. The day, I'm sure, when he gets drafted, obviously his birthday, things of that nature, the day where he passed Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list, etc., etc. The time he outscored the Mavs in three quarters. The point being, there's every single year there's going to be a lot of days where we're going to look back and say, wow, on this day Kobe did something incredible because he did so many incredible things, obviously on many different days of the calendar year. But so in that sense, are there multiple Mamba days? Absolutely. Ironically, today's a Monday. August 24th this year is also a Monday. So I'll have another Mamba Day monologue, whatever. But so I did think that is a good point. Just because there may not have been something special that he did on a certain day that's publicly known doesn't mean that it, sorry, I should reframe that. What I mean to say is it doesn't have to be a special day just for you to honor Kobe if he was someone that inspired you. I definitely fall in that boat. So I definitely like this, what my brother said, saying every day is Mamba Day because that's how it was to him. But that said, April 13th definitely is a little bit of a icing on the cake. Scoring 60 points. I talked about this last year in a podcast with Joe. Yeah, he took 50 shots, but what I think is incredibly impressive is you look at how he finishes that game. He is taking incredibly tough shots. He's tired as shit. And most of us, most athletes, but every normal people, we would get in our heads, lose a little bit of focus, probably miss a shot or two, but he makes his last five shots, hits some really tough shots, and hits those last two free throws to get to 60. it takes a lot of discipline and focus and not getting too high or too low in that moment. And then obviously to deliver the win in your last game on a 60-point victory, that's something. Plus, you actually look back at the numbers. He shot incredibly well from he shot pretty well from the field, 44% on 50 shots. If you can get 44% from a guard, that's pretty solid. And when you consider that it was 50 shots, that's pretty good as well because as Joe pointed out in a podcast last year, taking shots is not a linear progression. The more shots you take, generally, the more tired you are, the lower quality of shots you generally get. And in theory, you should start to shoot a lower percentage. So 44% is pretty good, all things considered. And he actually shot pretty well from within 2 point range. He had to settle for quite a few threes, and I think those numbers maybe 7 for 21 or seven or maybe I'm actually going to check right now, but from if I recall correctly, he didn't shoot incredibly well from three. So when you take the threes out, he actually shot really well from two. So I think that is something that gets lost in the shuffle. And like I said, just to finish on five made shots and to get deliver the win, I think that is something that people sleep on. So yeah, he was 6 for 21, about 29% from three that game. So if my math adds up, that means he was 16 for 29 from two, which all things considered, I'm checking it now, doing the math. 16 for 29, that's 55% from two. Not bad at all. And then to go 10 of 12 from three free throw line, that's solid. Really good actually. So, like I said, that is obviously one of his more iconic games, especially for younger people like myself. But it's also where he delivers one of his iconic lines or iconic phrases of "Mamba out," and so I just think that is one of the more special games I've had the privilege to watch, and so I every April 13th I want to just celebrate that and remember how I felt watching that game and so forth. Obviously, it was the last time we got to see him play. It's a little more sad this year, obviously, because of him passing away, unfortunately, this in January. But that is a game that is one of the best games, if not the best, one of the most special games I've had the pleasure of seeing. So, but that said, I do think this idea that hey, every day is a Mamba Day. I definitely think that that's a great that's a great attitude to have if he was someone that inspired you. And I actually think that the I actually think that one thing that really gets lost in I wouldn't say lost, but maybe people don't think about enough when they talk about that game is that he's Kobe and he has the whole world watching him and everyone's expecting him to put on a show and so forth, and to have all that expectation and he started the game off kind of cold, not shooting great, to have all that expectation and to actually outdo every expectation that everybody has for you when you're already one of the greatest basketball players of all time. I think that is something that takes, like I said, a supreme level of discipline, confidence, just being you have to be really locked in, and also, like I said, you have to be very, very calm and confident with your demeanor. And so, one interesting thing tangentially related, but one interesting thing about that night is that was a very special night for basketball because I remember that was the night where the Warriors played the Grizzlies to get to 73 wins. And that's actually another thing that I want to actually kind of commemorate and discuss because I know a lot of casual fans and quick people will be quick to say, oh, well, they won 73 games, but they didn't win the championship, so it doesn't mean anything. I think that's absolute bogus. I don't know if we're ever going to see 74 wins. And that season, and even for most of the playoffs, essentially up until Game 5 of the Cleveland series, unfortunately, the Warriors played some of the highest level team basketball I have ever seen, and they, to night in, night out, just absolutely dominate and instill the living fear into opponents is something really impressive in this era of load management and people not going 100% every night. I wouldn't even say the Warriors that season were going 100%, but every night, but they were trying, and it's hard to just consistently stay on top. We always see that, in three-peat situations, the teams, or not three-peat situations, but dynastic situations, whether it's the Heatles or this recent Golden State run with Kevin Durant, as well as the Cleveland run with LeBron. Towards the end, there generally is a little more of a decline because guys are taking more time to focus on the postseason as opposed to putting their energy into regular season games. So I think it's still really impressive what the 15-16 Warriors do, and that is still to me the best team, one of the best teams I've ever seen. It definitely in the conversation, even though they didn't win a title. I'm not going to be one of those fans that shit on them. I appreciate the fantastic basketball that they played, and what I really like about that team was just the fact that they were essentially they were us they yes, they were beating teams and dominating teams night in, night out, but what I really appreciated actually was the fact that they seemed to have so much joy doing it. They were playing such a beautiful brand of basketball, and they were enjoying, and it seemed like everybody was on the same page. Everybody was enjoying it. When Clay got hot, Steph was the happiest guy on the bench, and when Steph would start cooking, Clay was Clay was happier than he would have been when he was cooking. So just to see that real selflessness and real concept of a team, I really appreciate. And what's crazy is about that season is Luke Walton was the one who started the season as the interim coach while Steve Kerr was out. Goes off to a historic start, and yet they due to NBA rules or something, they Steve Kerr is credited with the wins. Steve Kerr also won Coach of the Year that year, and Luke Walton didn't get a chance to coach in the All-Star game. All those things I think are absolute bogus because Luke Walton was literally the head coach as they were on this historic run to start off the season. I think it was the best start in NBA history. And so I think Luke Walton deserves those. That's just a small nuanced thing, but I think Luke Walton deserves to have those wins under his name because right now you look at him and unfortunately he's a sub 500 coach, but how dope would it be if you look and it's like wow, he was 42-4 or whatever his record was. So the 15-16 season, that really was a special year of basketball, both on the pro level and the college level. But sticking to the pros, that night specifically, Kobe gets moved to ESPN2. The Warriors are chasing after 73 wins. I remember just tuning in, watching both games, but I made sure that I didn't miss a second of the Lakers Jazz game. And what's crazy is, ironically, that year I started listening to G-Eazy, the rapper who's from Oakland, and he is a Warriors fan. And yet, even though he was a Warriors fan, and I'm pretty sure he rooted for the Warriors when they were bad as well, but G-Eazy, who was a Warriors fan, chose to go to Kobe's last game instead of watching his home team break 73 wins. And obviously it's very well documented how many stars there were in the crowd. That place was absolutely rocking. One of the games I definitely wish I could have been at. Prices were insane. I think I remember seeing Kanye, Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg. Obviously you got good old Jack Nicholson. So shout out Kobe, man. Happy Mamba Day. Although it's like I said, it's one of many Mamba Days, one of many Mamba Days throughout the years, and hopefully hopefully I'm sure there's going to be rewatches and so forth, re-airings, sorry, of the game. I hope more people can uh, appreciate Kobe's last game the way I know that I do because I really think it is something special, a special game. So meanwhile, I guess on the I guess to stick to the topic of I'm thinking what I want to touch upon. So talked about Mamba Day. Yeah, I guess shout out Kobe, but I don't want to talk. I don't want to really drag this out and talk when I don't really have too much to say. So just last thing, I just wanted to go over that game, and so now I think I'm gonna talk about some stuff that's been happening in other news, specifically in basketball. So right now, obviously, the NBA's, or sorry, all sports are dead or postponed, I should say. I did want to talk about maybe some college basketball news because there are some there are some headlines to discuss. So first off, yesterday, which was Sunday, April 12th, Easter Sunday. Happy Easter, by the way, if you celebrate. I forgot to mention that. But so on April 12th, Ziaire Williams, who was one of the top guys that was still uncommitted in the class of 2020, he committed to Stanford University, and it is, I think, Stanford's first five-star recruit since 2007. Let me actually do some checking. I'm thinking, was that Brooke Lopez maybe who was? No, it wasn't Brooke Lopez. Let me think. Sorry, I'm doing a quick search. Who was? I'm trying to see if I can guess. Who was that recruit? Anyhow, so Ziaire Williams commits to Stanford, and that actually makes the Pac-12 have quite a few interesting freshmen, projected one top freshmen coming in. The obvious ones being Ziaire Williams, and then the number one recruit in the country, Evan Mobley. So that at least gives the Pac-12, an interesting little nugget, as well as the point guard at UCLA, Dacian Nix. So that's what, three top 10-ish guys. And what's interesting is you have one of each position on the court, right? You have a point guard, you have a wing, and you have a big man, all of who are projected to be one and done. And then still within the top 50, you have Marcus Bagley, younger brother of Marvin Bagley, who's going to Arizona State. But I think that'll hopefully that'll make the Pac-12 an interesting watch. Although you could also bring up the point that this past year they had a couple top freshmen with Isaiah Stewart and Jaden McDaniels, Nico Mannion, Josh Green, and I'm blanking on the Arizona guy's name, the big man, but Zeke Naji. But anyhow, so to be fair, the Pac-12 had a very nice flux of freshmen this past year. But I guess this goes back to the argument: how much do you believe? How the belief that last year's high school senior class was down. Hopefully, this coming year it's better. I think it should be just based on what I've been reading and seeing. But once again, with this stuff, you never know. But anyhow, that should be interesting to see to why. Hopefully, I think Stanford is a program that really not deserves, but really should be better than it has been in recent years. They were going to make the NCAA tournament this past year. They've sent a couple guys to the NBA. Tyrell Terry, if he returns for next year, he's currently testing the waters of the draft. If he returns for next year, that Stanford team is has really has quite the ceiling. But they sent KZ Okpala to the NBA. They had 2014. They were a 10 seed and they made it to the Sweet 16. And they had guys like Josh Hustis, Anthony Brown, and Dwight Powell, all of who played in the NBA. So, not bad at all. But Stanford is a program that I feel like should be better in that you can pitch, living in a very nice area, having a top education, and the school, unlike, say, some of the Ivy League schools or some of the top schools, it does have a good basketball tradition with Mike Montgomery. He had that when he was there. Stanford was an absolute powerhouse. They were one seed multiple times, went to the Final Four, and on top of that, they've had success after Mike Montgomery. They did have the Lopez twins, most notably. And like I said, they've been able to send guys to the NBA. So if from my perspective, the way I look at it, I don't see why Stanford, and not to say that it would quite be on the same level in terms of being a basketball powerhouse, but why can't Stanford kind of be like the Duke of the East, an elite academic institution that gets good recruits and also has an elite basketball program? So, anyhow, so I'm taking a look at the database. I think it actually may have been 2006. So Ziaire Williams is the first five-star since 2006, which was Brooke Lopez. So yeah, 14 years. So that'll be interesting to monitor. As for some of the other college basketball recruiting notes, yesterday JT Thor, who was he's ranked 54th. He committed to Auburn. First off, last name Thor, so that's pretty dope. But anyhow, so JT Thor commits, and now there's a lot of buzz since Jalen Green, who's by ESPN the top recruit, he's number 3 in 247 Sports. He is expected to make his decision this Friday. And he appears to be deciding between Memphis and Auburn. And so if if Jalen Green commits this, so people are now theorizing, does the commitment of JT Thor mean that Jalen Green could commit to Auburn and complete this monster recruiting class? And yes, when I say it would be a monster recruiting class, it would be because they also have Sharif Cooper, who is one of the top point guards. He's ranked 20th in 247. He's going to Auburn as well, along with JT Thor. So J it's interesting. I feel like this could be one of the more it would probably have to be the best class in Auburn history, but with the exception of maybe the one with Charles Barkley. But it would remind me a little bit of Memphis's class last year, except for the fact that they would have less depth and more star power because Sharif Cooper, Jalen Green, McDonald's All-Americans, throw in another top 50 guy. For a program like Auburn to get that, that would be pretty formidable. So let me also and they also have let me see. They also have and then I guess they also have two three-star guys who have signed with them as well. But that could definitely be a very interesting thing to monitor. So if it appears, like I said, it appears to be down between Memphis and Auburn the two for Jalen Green. So I would lean towards Auburn just based on what I just outlined. And 247 also seems to think that Jalen Green is leaning towards Auburn as well. So I'm taking a look at Auburn's current roster. Let's assume Jalen Green commits, right? So they're gonna lose. Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that Auburn's going to lose a lot of their key guys: Wiley, McLemore, Purifoy, and Doughty. And they're also going to lose Isaac Okoro early to the draft. So this really would be quite a reload for Bruce Pearl and the Tigers. Anyhow, moving on from Jalen Green. Also, I guess this is what happens when, there's no real sports news going on. But Jalen Green's going to announce this Friday. It appears as though the Friday after that Greg Brown from Austin, Texas, is going to make a decision as well. Now, he's projected to go to Texas, but it seems to be down to Texas, Memphis, and then it seems like Kentucky's also in the mix. So it would actually be quite a turn of events and quite the coup for Penny Hardaway if he was able to get Greg Brown and Jalen Green to both commit to Memphis. But yeah, that's just another thing to monitor. Those two decisions coming up, as well as Joshua Christopher, who's actually going to make a decision today. I'm recording this in the morning, so I haven't been able to I haven't obviously hasn't made a decision, but it is. I'm reading now. It appears as though he will. He has not announced a college decision time, though. It's the the wide belief is that he will go to Michigan. 247 has him as a 100% to go to Michigan, and that's interesting. Yeah, I believe he's actually nephew. He's the nephew of Jalen Rose, so I'd be curious to see if Jalen had had an impact on that. But he is a top 10 guy, so those three guys, Josh Christopher, Greg Brown, and Jalen Green, are the last three guys still on the board with a decision to be made, and that will somewhat impact how we perceive certain teams to be next year. If Joshua Christopher goes as expected to Michigan, that would pair him up with that would make him part of a pretty good, really good recruiting class with Isaiah Todd as well as Hunter Dickinson, who who actually I've actually seen some of the highlights of. He's a tall, big. He has like a big, bulky build, but he's tall, but he's also can seems like he can put the ball on the floor, dribble handoff situations, and run some pick and pop action. So very curious to see how those where those three go. But unfortunately, even after they make their decisions, unfortunately in this situation, we still don't know the biggest thing that will impact, I think, next year's season is just obviously this pandemic. So hopefully we can all get past, recover from this, and hopefully things will be better sooner rather than later. But anyhow, so that is that. I'm taking a look. What else is on the docket? So I plowed through the basketball stuff a little bit faster than I thought I would. I guess I'll use this as a platform. Or I'll take a quick second to talk about. Actually, before I talk about the ESPN horse competition, I just want to quickly look and talk about a couple things. So Kentucky has the number one recruiting class for next year. I think this is so this is according to 247. This I want and I'm gonna pull up ESPN's team rankings. So ESPN and 247 both have Kentucky as the number one recruiting class. This is actually the first time in a couple years where I think Kentucky has been able to has a higher ranked recruiting class than Duke in both ESPN and 247 Sports. So that's definitely interesting. I'm very curious to see if Matt Harms, who's the Purdue transfer, I really think that he's waiting to see if Nick Richards declares for the draft. Speaking of Kentucky, by the way, Emmanuel quickly today officially will declare for the draft, and I think he's not leaving the option of returning to school. Let me take a quick look. Yeah, so he's not testing the waters. So that at least opens up playing time for guys like for a lot of the wing guys that are coming in. So Terrence Clark, BJ Boston. This is going to be one of the and Devin Askew. This is going to be one of the not longer, but taller Kentucky teams aside from maybe the 2015 team, because normally Calipari has not had as much length on the wings, right? You think of Kid Gilchrist, Devin Booker was more. He wasn't a lengthy guy. He was obviously a bucket, but so it'll be interesting to see. Kevin Knox also comes to mind, but this will be kind of new seeing guys like Terrence Clark, BJ Boston, Devin Askew, who's big for a point guard. I think that that'll be an interesting thing to see how Cal takes what is a more lengthy lineup and in theory should be a little more versatile and modern than what he's used to. And that's also before I factor in Keon Brooks coming back. But I think that Matt Harms is really waiting to see if Nick Richards declares for the draft. Because if Nick Richards declares for the draft and Matt Harms commits, he's got to be the starting center, no doubt. Because the only big guy that they're returning who played some minutes, assuming Nick Richards declares, is pretty sure it's basically just down to EJ Montgomery unless he decides to leave as well, which would leave an even bigger hole. So next year, I really think that assuming Nick Richards is gone, there's a big opportunity for Matt Harms to play a lot at a big program, but also win a national championship. And so I'm very curious to see that Matt Harms is definitely the transfer I'm most interested in the market. Meanwhile, you take a look at Duke's class. They're it's primarily headlined by Jalen Johnson as well as Jeremy Roach, but they have seems like they've really loaded up on all positions and really across a lot of different pockets and basketball powerhouses. So this is interesting. They have Jalen Johnson, who's a top 10 guy. You go for that no-brainer. PBI for Jeremy Roach went to Paul VI, also known as PBI, which is a basketball powerhouse in near where I'm from in the DMV. They go to Chicago to Whitney Young, which I believe is where Jaleel Okafor played for DJ Stewart. They plucked a guy from IMG Academy, Huntington Prep, and Trinity Episcopal, which is another basketball powerhouse in Richmond. So it's just interesting uh, seeing the Duke really pluck a lot of guys from various basketball powerhouses, kind of spread across East Coast. Just something interesting that I noticed. So with all that in mind, Carolina also is going to load up. They're going to have Caleb Love, Walker Kessler. Very curious to see if they're better fits for and Dayron Sharp. My apologies. So looks like Roy's going to get his athletic bigs that he normally wants to play with, as well as a speedy point guard. But curious to see if they're a better fit for the offense that he wants to the way for the style in which Roy wants to play than Cole Anthony, who was primarily in theory you want to run Cole Anthony as a pick and roll point guard. So that should be interesting to monitor. But one thing, so what's interesting is you have three typical suspects as your top three recruiting classes in your 247 database. I'm pretty sure it's probably the same in ESPN. Yep, the same three. Actually, 247 and ESPN have the same top five. Number four is Michigan, like I outlined. If they get Josh Christopher, I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe surpass Carolina. But a team that I actually think, right now is not projected to be a top 10, maybe definitely not a top five team, but I think could be really good next year is the team that's actually sitting in number five in these team rankings, and that is in these recruiting databases, and that is the Tennessee Volunteers. So my thought process on that. This would be assuming that Pons, Yaviz Pons, I can't quite say his name, assuming he stays in school. You also are assuming that I'm also assuming guys like is hang on. So I'm assuming that Fulkerson Fulkerson is going to stay as well. And then I'm assuming Josiah Jordan James is going to stay. Triple J. He was an All-American last year, highly touted recruit from South Carolina. He was hurt in the summer and he never quite got into a groove offensively, but he really reminded me of a guy who was like a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades, because he did a little bit of everything. He was a decent passer, good rebounder, and it was a solid playmaker. Little bit in the Theo Pinson vein. So take that. I think that he has the potential to take a leap, like you often see with freshmen going into their sophomore years, especially for a guy with the pedigree and as talented as Josiah Jordan James. Take all that in mind with the return of guys like Pons and Fulkerson. You put in their coming recruiting class, which is ranked fifth because they have Jaden Springer, who's a guard. They have two 5-star guards in Springer and Johnson. If one of those guys hits, even if the other guy is a guy that plays 10 minutes, and as long as one of them hits and you can get a quality 20, maybe 25 minutes out of him, then I really think that pair that with the nucleus that I just outlined, and they could be a very versatile and interesting team to watch. They would have guys primarily from 6'5" to 6'9", but all guys who in theory can play in multiple positions in multiple parts of the floor in multiple roles. So I think Tennessee is a team that might start the season. They might start ranked maybe what 16th in the AP poll, and I really think that they could climb up back to top five. Not which they were not long ago when they had Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams. Plus, by the way, I actually think that Rick Barnes at this point has become underrated as a coach. So that's just something to keep an eye out for because in most years there's always a team that starts the year off outside of the top five, top 10-ish hype and climbs their way to what a 2 seed, sometimes a 1 seed. So I think obviously this past year, if we assume if we assume Kansas, Baylor, Gonzaga, and Dayton were going to be the 1 seeds, then Baylor was in that 16 range and they climbed up to 1 seed status. Gonzaga, I'm trying to see, where was Gonzaga heading into the year? While I Google that, Dayton was completely unranked, so they would have likely been a 1 seed. So, like I said, so yeah, Gonzaga was eighth, but yeah, Dayton would have gone from unranked to 1 seed. It happens more than you think if you go back through the last, 10 seasons or so. So, I think that Tennessee definitely an interesting team to monitor. So let's see. I'm hitting about the okay, approaching about for the 40 minute mark. So obviously in these trying times, in these times, trying to stay occupied, trying to be creative. I'm trying to come up with some creative ideas. So if there's anything that you think and I say this to say any interesting ideas and whatnot, just shoot them. More than happy to take a listen. I've been cranking out some TV shows, podcasts, books, YouTube videos, etc., doing some deep dives, and obviously trying to make the most out of this situation that we're in. So let me take a look. What else did I have on the docket? So real quick, I just wanted to say I'm probably at some point this week gonna have Sid back on, and we're going to do a redraft of the 2010 NBA draft. I think that 2010, I picked 2010. Well, first and foremost, I recognize that Bill Simmons is doing his redraftable series, so I'm not here touting that I have some original idea, but I do think it's a very fun exercise to do, and I think 2010 works well because it's been 10 years, obviously, and I think that that's enough time to where you can say, okay, we've seen how the careers play out for a lot of these guys. And, if on top of that, there still is room to say, I think I could see potential growth from this player in this department and whatnot. Because if you do a redraft let's say I did a redraft of the 2018 draft, yes, you can do it. And, in that scenario, you assume Luka goes one. But 2018 is still so recent, right? Like for instance, Kevin Knox, who has really struggled so far, he could end up being a great player. We've seen flashes from guys like Michael Porter Jr. and so forth. So as well. So 2018, I'd say the 2018, 2017, 18, 19, obviously too recent. And 2016 is actually interesting because a lot of those guys are going to be up for rookie extensions for their first extensions. But like I said, if we're talking from a drafting and looking back at who really was the best player, it's also pretty recent. So I think a decade is a good marker to do because even a draft like say the 2014 draft, I still think there's room for guys to change how we interpret or how we value their careers. For instance, Zach LaVine was in the 2014 draft, and I think that he could still turn it around. I think that he's got to probably end up in a better situation. But Aaron Gordon's another guy who I think can still really shift the narrative, so to speak, on how we feel about him. So anyhow, 2010 redraft definitely looking forward to doing that. As I was doing preparation for a 2010 redraft, it actually kind of crossed my mind that as I was looking through the names, there's four notable All Stars, and they all go in the top 10 with John Wall, Boogie, Gordon Hayward, and Paul George. And then after that, it's kind of there's kind of a decline where you kind of end up talking about role players and guys who are good players. And interestingly, 10 years after this draft, one of the guys who I think would go in the lottery, and I'm going to make a case for him most likely in the next podcast, but this guy's not even in the league anymore. But honestly, Jeremy Lin might be one of the 15 best players from that draft class, and obviously he didn't go drafted. So I think that that's always really a really interesting thing to take a look at. But anyhow, moving on from moving on from basketball, I'm going to talk a little bit about some TV that I've watched recently. Um, so so real quick, I do want to have a podcast where I can discuss some of these more in depth, specifically this first show, and that is Ozark season 3. So right off the bat, Ozark season 3 I finished in I think 2 days, and I just have to say that Ozark Mindhunter is probably my favorite show just because I love Fincher, and I think that that type of thriller, the true crime psychological thriller, that Fincher feel, the cinematography, everything, I just absolutely love. But honestly, I think Ozark might be my second favorite show. And this season of Ozark was the first one that seemed to get all the critical love. It got a 97 certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think that it is all totally warranted. To me, it was the season that I enjoyed the most. And I know that, oftentimes we can have recency bias, but I think what I really liked about what they did specifically in this season was that I really felt like with every single character, I went back and forth on every single one of them. And not to get into too many spoilers, but a character that I absolutely thought that I hated, and I still don't like this character. I'm not rooting for this character, but Darlene, who I have never liked, there were actually moments where I actually was kind of pulling for her, and she had her moments, and I really think there were other characters where I kind of started really pulling for them, and then I kind of turned on me. I kind of turned and was like, I don't know how I feel. Obviously, the when it comes to new additions, the standouts are going to be Navarro as well as that Ben. I think he was played by Tom Pelfrey. I can't. Apologies if I misspoke or didn't say his last name right, but I really thought that Uncle, ironically, Uncle Ben, that I thought Uncle Ben was probably the strongest new addition because you really grow to like him, and he's a very sympathetic and complex character that, yes, he is messing up some things in the dynamic with regards to Wendy and the family and the cartel, but he's probably one of the more likable guys, and in this crazy world that Ozark is set in, with them obviously being dealing with the cartel and the mob. He's kind of like the audience's mind, where we're like, holy shit, this is all, when you take a step back and think about these things rationally, this is freaking crazy. So that So I mean that, plus the fact that he seemed to really vibe with Jonah. I really liked Ben as a character. I guess on the note of characters I actually just didn't like ever, the one character I'd never really liked was Tommy. Obvious for obvious reasons. And Agent Evans. Maya, I'm neutral. I'm not really sure what to think about Maya. I'm actually going to discuss a theory about Maya that I read online recently that I think could be true. So I'm very curious to see. But anyhow, another new character, newcomer to the show, was Frank Cosgrove Jr., who is the son of obviously Frank Cosgrove, but he was played by Joseph Sikora. He had a very minor role, and his character didn't exactly come off as likable. But I did like his presence in the show. I really like Joseph Sikora. That guy is a cool guy, and he's a very good actor. So I really like Joseph Sikora, and I'm very curious to see if he gets an expanded role in season 4 because I would like to see more of that character. Even though I don't think there were any moments where I was like pulling for him or rooting for him, I definitely thought that it was a well acted character and a character that I want to see more of and be more entangled into the main thread of Ozark. So, before I talk about this Maya theory that I heard, so first and foremost, spoilers for Ozark if you haven't seen it already. But so, real quick, it seems that Ozark's plan is to have total of 5 seasons. So it's kind of nuts that I'm done with 3 of the seasons and more than halfway there. But so I'm going to talk about this Maya theory. So this is a spoiler warning, but I saw a theory floating online that Maya, this FBI agent who's tasked to watch Marty, that she is actually working for the cartel and she is there to make sure that Marty doesn't to essentially keep tabs on Marty to test whether or not he will his overall loyalty to the cartel. And so I thought, that's interesting. It seems like the cartel is has their hands in everything, and so I looked at some reasons why this might be true. And if you notice, she always is pressing him to give in a confession, obviously, take a plea deal. Obviously, any FBI agent would do this, but given her overall persistence and her unwillingness, so her persistence could be, her reporting to Navarro, hey, is he going to take the plea deal? I think the timing of in the last episode, the timing in which she calls Marty saying that not Wendy, Helen is going to sign a plea deal confession, and he's like, "Huh, what are you talking about? That's not me." The timing of that, and then them going to Mexico, and then Helen being the one that gets removed by Navarro, I think that's definitely an interesting thing where, the timing of that definitely could give credence to this theory. And then also the fact that Marty is trying well, the whole time when Marty is trying to convert her and he is giving her leads on other, instances of financial fraud, she never takes them down. She never jumps on the lead and, she cites her whole stance on, I want to do this the right way. But maybe it's because she doesn't actually want to see these people, these other, instances of laundering and cooking the books go down. So maybe she is working for, so I think all that gives reason to believe that she might be working for the cartel. That would definitely be a crazy revelation in season 4 if that is the case. And then lastly, when Marty is taken hostage and he's trapped by the cartel and tortured and so forth, the thing that gets him out of the the thing that gets him out of that is the fact that he brings up that, hey, I can maybe convert this FBI agent. And I think the fact that Navarro pounces on that and he's consistently he seems very invested in that idea, maybe could be sure you could argue that yeah, maybe he's just really invested because it's a good idea and that's an incredibly valuable asset to him. But on top of that, maybe he believes he can he smiles and thinks that it and signs off on the idea for Marty because he knows that actually has the inner he has the inner playbook on Maya. Anyhow, those are some of my Ozark thoughts. I also binged I also binged the crap out of Homecoming season 1, which Homecoming was a good show. What I really like about the show is that it's beautifully shot and the episodes are short and snazzy and there's this kind of aura of mystery the whole time, but at the same time it definitely doesn't quite enter the stratosphere of top shows, favorite shows for me, but that said I really liked it. Like I wouldn't put it in my top 5 of shows that I've seen, but I definitely did enjoy watching it, and like I said, it's a quick watch. Ironically, while I was in the middle of watching it, the season 2 trailer came out, and so I waited to finish season 1 and then checked out the season 2 trailer. So it appears as though, and this is not a huge spoiler, but it appears as though Julia Roberts is not going to return for season. Let me actually check. Julia Roberts. Yeah, Julia Roberts will not return to season two of Homecoming, so definitely curious to see what storyline thread they're going to go with there. And it looks like they've got Janelle Monáe, so that'll be very interesting. So yeah, right now I'm trying to figure out what my next. Right now I'm actually in the middle of watching True. I started True Detective, but I'm also curious. I'm also thinking of maybe picking up different show along with that. So now's not a bad time to do that for obviously. On top of that, I think that now with a lot of free time and just time to myself, I think it's very smart that uh, really quickly. I think that it's very smart that a lot of these places have been, or a lot of these TV networks, whether it's Turner, ESPN, and so forth, have been doing a lot of these classic re-airs. But I wonder when those classic re-airs will kind of lose their luster, so to speak, or maybe we found a new, totally new, not totally new, but a new segment, a new idea, potentially an opportunity within sports programming and entertainment. So definitely something I want to monitor. A lot of, if you're a college basketball fan, a lot of the NCAA March Madness YouTube page has uploaded a bunch of games start to finish. So if there's a game that interests you, I definitely recommend you checking that out. But on the note of sports programming, I forgot to talk about this when I said I would earlier, but couple last points before I wrap this podcast up. I'm really milking it honestly at this point. I wanted to hit 60 minutes to honor Kobe, but especially today. But so real quick, couple last sports points. So I actually watched a little bit of the NBA's ESPN's horse competition where they had WNBA players, WNBA players, and a couple retired guys. So I saw the Trey Young Chauncey Billups matchup. And what I will say is I definitely really respect the fact that they're trying and they tried to do something out of the box in these, maybe not out of the box, but in these times. So that was that. Didn't quite wow me as much as maybe one might hope, but at the end of the day, I can respect them for trying. And in a lot of ways, I don't know if maybe I don't know if that was best suited for the ESPN, the ESPN one, right? It seemed a lot more suitable for like an Instagram live stream where just obviously part of it is the quality. I also think the competition itself, it's something you want you want to be in this chat room with fans chiming in on, hey, maybe you should try this shot and whatnot. So I definitely think that the longer this goes on, the more we see these kind of unique approaches to programming and people trying to come up with stuff out of the box. So I definitely think that the horse competition is a start, but I don't know if it was, like I said, I don't know if it was best suited for ESPN one. Maybe it should have been on ESPN's Instagram story, something like that. But anyhow, another trend that I've been seeing is obviously a lot of these athletes doing live streams where they have other famous, other notable people on. Some of them are using it to, bring to do like COVID Q&A and awareness and information sessions. Most notably, Steph Curry and having Dr. Anthony Fauci on. So I think that's a great way to use your platform. But on top of that, from more of a fun entertainment perspective, there's like I've seen Dwayne Wade has been having guys on, Chris Paul, Steph Curry has been doing trivia and so forth, and LeBron was with Damian Lillard. And I think that's definitely a really cool and interesting way. A lot of the times we hear, they end up kind of dropping a nugget or a story that we didn't quite get to hear. And so I think that that's always really dope when you get to, you know, get the news cycle, the sports news cycle, sorry, churn in a little bit. To me, the thing that I thought was there were a couple really cool moments where one of them was when Carmelo talked about the story, told the story about how LeBron saved his life when they were on vacation together. That was the same vacation with the whole banana boat fiasco, not fiasco, the infamous banana boat. Also, there's Chris Paul talking about and Steph Curry having a fun back and forth, and then Steph Curry jestfully saying that he only plays defense half the time, and he's he's saying that to be funny. I think Steph is a very self-aware guy, but I will always defend Steph and say that he might not be the most gifted, physically speaking, gifted defender. But one thing I like is that he's smart and he actually tries on defense when a lot of guys who have the physical tools to be great defenders, not just great defenders, like elite defenders, they kind of take that side of the ball not so seriously. So I definitely can commend him for putting in that effort. Last point discussion topic I wanted to hit on was this recent report that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, their relationship is unsalvageable. Obviously, they had the coronavirus debacle where Rudy Gobert didn't appear to take it particularly seriously, but I will say Rudy Gobert has come on and he's talked about, fixing that relationship and whatnot. And I will say I don't think this is some he's got to go. He definitely wants this has. There's no way this can work. But that said, assuming the Jazz do look to move one of them, I think the obvious answer is you want to move Gobert and build around Mitchell. Some of that is age, contract, flexibility, etc. But on top of that, Gobert, not to say that I don't think he is a quote regular season player, but there are definitely specific playoff matchups where he is less valuable than normal. Obviously, the past two playoffs, sorry, they have seen this when they run into the Rockets and they just try to get James Harden or Gobert switched on to James Harden every single time. So I definitely think that if you are the Jazz and you do think these this All Star pairing probably won't is not something we want to keep going with going forward, then I think you definitely want to look at Gobert as the guy to move as opposed to Mitchell. I really think that Mitchell can be a one of the top three, if not the best shooting guard in the NBA. So I definitely don't want to trade that away if I'm the Utah Jazz. Anyhow, that that's a quick NBA note. I'm also seeing online that the NBA released a memo where there's a 25-day program that is essentially a potential return plan where I'm assuming that the idea is that they're going to do so it's saying that there's an 11-day stretch of individual workouts where they can kind of try to get back into as they can ramp things back up into playing shape, and then I assume there's going to be testing and so forth. And then they're going to probably play in an empty a limited gym, most likely like a practice facility, honestly. Very curious to see very curious to see what they do, but obviously the NBA, the owners, the players, the TV studios, as well as the actual organizations, everybody wants to play. Everyone wants to see basketball, but at the end of the day, they don't decide the timeline. Unfortunately, that is dictated by the virus. So we'll see, but definitely think it's interesting that there are discussions about potential return plans, and I'd assume that these return plans wouldn't start until the summertime. So definitely, if there's any time to experiment with the calendar in terms of the NBA, it's definitely now. So that is that. So with that said, I definitely want to wrap things up I'll definitely wrap things up here. Want to thank you for listening to the Splash Tag podcast. Once again, if you haven't done so already, please rate, review, subscribe on whatever medium you're listening to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or YouTube. And you'll hear from me soon with some hopefully more good content. Go celebrate, have a happy Mamba Day. Go celebrate, do something dope. Maybe read the Mamba mentality. I'll see you later.